I still remember the sound of the foil crinkling over a casserole dish as I set it on their counter. Chicken and rice, Vanessa's favorite, because she'd had a rough week with the kids. I didn't need to be asked. I never did. If something needed doing, I was there, keys in hand, soup in the trunk, ready to fill in whatever cracks life had left for them. That's what mothers do. Or at least, that's what I told myself every time I canceled my own plans to babysit, rearranged my bills to help cover theirs, or stayed silent when a thank you never came. I didn't want praise. I didn't need fanfare. I just wanted to be part of the life I'd helped build. My name is Evelyn Grant. I'm 74 years old, and I suppose what I'm admitting to, finally, is that I built my sense of worth around being needed. And somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing when that need turned into expectation, when love turned into obligation, when showing up stopped being something they were grateful for and just became something they assumed I'd do. Maybe that's why I didn't question it that Thursday afternoon when Vanessa texted to say dinner was canceled. Greg wasn't feeling well, she said. I didn't ask for details. I didn't press. I just made a pot of chicken noodle soup and drove it over like always, left it on the porch with a little note. Hope you all feel better soon. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. That one quiet lie would pull the thread on a whole life I'd knitted around theirs. But looking back, I think part of me knew, because I didn't drive straight home. I took the long way. I turned around. I needed to see for myself. It came at 3:42 p.m., just as I was folding a load of towels still warm from the dryer. Vanessa's name lit up the screen, and I smiled before I even read it. Thursdays were our standing dinner nights. Nothing fancy, just a tradition we'd started years ago when the boys were little and bedtime routines still ran on Goldfish crackers and Elmo songs. It had always been my favorite part of the week. I got to bring dessert, sometimes cook the main dish, and always sit beside my grandsons while they told me about school, soccer, or whatever cartoon character they were obsessed with that month. The text was short. Hey, Mom, gonna have to cancel tonight. Greg's not feeling great. Rain check? No emojis. No warmth. Just words. I stared at it for a second, then typed back, Of course. Hope he feels better soon. Let me know if you need anything. I added a heart, then set the phone down on the kitchen table. I should have felt fine. Plans change. People get sick. But something about the message didn't sit right. Maybe it was the flatness of it, or the fact that Vanessa usually called when she canceled. She knew how much I looked forward to these nights. Still, I pushed the feeling down. I told myself I was being sensitive. I folded the towels, put them away, and tried to let it go. But old habits die hard, and mine was taking care of them. I had soup on the stove within the hour, just a simple chicken noodle, nothing heavy. I poured it into a container, wrote their names on a sticky note, and made the short drive to their neighborhood. The sun was starting to set behind the houses, and for a moment, I let myself feel useful. That's what I'd always wanted, to be helpful, to be part of their lives in small, loving ways. When I got to their street, I parked by the curb and walked the container up to their porch. There were lights on inside, which didn't seem strange at first. I placed the soup gently near the door and turned to leave. But then I heard something. Laughter. Not the TV, not the boys playing. Real laughter, full and layered with conversation. I paused. My stomach clenched, not with suspicion, but with a quiet, heavy kind of dread. I turned back and walked down the sidewalk, then crossed the street. I didn't even realize I was doing it. My feet moved on their own. I found a spot behind the large maple tree across from their living room window and stood still, hoping I was wrong. But I saw it. Through the glass, I saw the dinner table set, candles lit, plates full, Vanessa in the kitchen bringing out a bowl of salad, Greg at the head of the table laughing. The boys were there, Greg's parents too, sitting right where I usually sat, their wine glasses already half empty. No one looked sick. Nothing looked canceled. They hadn't forgotten. They'd just decided I didn't need to be included. I stood there longer than I should have, not moving, not breathing, really, just watching through the window as the people I loved most in the world laughed and passed dishes around a table I had set more times than I could count. The clink of silverware and the warmth of their smiles might as well have been daggers. I had made excuses for them before, brushed off thoughtless comments, let my birthday pass with a forgotten card or a half-hearted text. But this was different. They had lied, not overlooked me, not forgotten. They had chosen not to include me. And that choice was deliberate. That choice had weight. Still, I didn't move. My heart was loud in my chest, drowning out every reasonable thought. I tried to find an explanation that wouldn't hurt. Maybe Greg had suddenly felt better and they didn't want to disturb me again. Maybe it was a last-minute thing. Maybe. But that flicker of doubt, faint and cold, grew stronger by the second. I knew better. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. A quiet, cruel one. I walked back to my car slowly, the air heavier than when I'd arrived. I sat behind the wheel, keys in my lap, and stared at my hands. They looked old, worn. The hands that had wiped their noses, tied shoelaces, cooked meals, ironed shirts, and held Vanessa through 2 pregnancies. These were the same hands that had paid their electric bill more than once without ever mentioning it. And now, apparently, they were no longer welcome at the dinner table. Tears came, quiet at first, rolling down my cheeks without permission. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. Just sat in that little car as the realization sank in. I was being phased out, not with malice, not with a fight, but with something colder, indifference. And somehow that hurt more. By the time I pulled away from the curb, the street was empty behind me. My container of soup still sat on their porch, probably unnoticed. I didn't want it back. I didn't want anything from them, not in that moment. All I could think about was how many times I'd put their needs ahead of mine, how many plans I had canceled, how many invitations I'd never gotten in return. Back at home, I washed my face and changed into pajamas even though it wasn't yet dark. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call a friend. I sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing, and that was when the flicker became a flame. I opened the hall closet and reached for the small, gray file box on the top shelf. The one no one knew about, the one that held every receipt, every document, every paper trail of the things I had done for them. I set it gently on the table, the weight of it familiar. If they had decided I was no longer needed, then maybe it was time I stopped acting like I was. The next morning I moved slowly. Not because I was tired, but because everything inside me felt fragile, as though one sudden movement might cause something to break for good. I made my coffee the way I always did, half a spoon of sugar, a splash of cream, and sat by the window watching the street wake up. Joggers passed. A dog barked. Someone 2 houses down was already trimming hedges. Life went on, just as it always had, but something inside me had shifted. I couldn't stop seeing it, the table, the candles, Vanessa's smile, the sound of Greg's laughter carried through glass. It replayed in my mind in perfect detail, refusing to blur into memory. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. There was no one to tell, really. I had built my life around them so completely that somewhere along the way, I had let go of everyone else. The women from book club, the neighbors who used to invite me to lunch, even my cousin Linda, who called faithfully every few months. I had pushed them all aside, assuming there would always be time to circle back. But that time had been swallowed by school pickups and late-night phone calls about fevers, by financial emergencies, and emotional hand-holding. I opened the gray file box that still sat on my kitchen table. Inside, everything was neatly labeled in tabbed folders. Mortgage assistance documents, car payments I had quietly covered when Greg was between jobs, receipts for private school tuition, medical bills, emergency dental work. Even Vanessa's student loan payment I had helped with, when she and Greg got married. I had kept records not out of bitterness, but because part of me had always believed that what I gave mattered, that one day, if they ever forgot, I could hold it up as a reminder. Now, the box felt like something else entirely, a mirror, proof of how much I had poured into a well that no longer offered even the echo of appreciation. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing every page, not obsessively, but methodically. I made a list. What accounts were in my name? Which ones had autopay set up through my checking? What passwords had I shared out of convenience or trust? It wasn't revenge I was after. It was something quieter, a withdrawal of presence, a slow reclaiming of space. By noon, I had canceled 2 automatic payments and scheduled an appointment with my lawyer. The woman who answered the phone remembered me. "It's been a while, Mrs. Grant. Everything okay?" I told her yes. Everything was just fine. I needed to update some documents. No rush, but soon. After lunch, I returned the file box to the hall closet. The house was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but it suited me. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect when a betrayal is uncovered. I was clear. And in that clarity, I felt a small, surprising sense of peace. They had closed a door. Now it was up to me whether I stood on the porch or found another way forward. There's a moment, just before something breaks, when everything feels suspended, like the air itself holds its breath. That's what I remember most about that night, the quiet in my car as I sat parked 2 streets away, the dim orange glow of the street lamp outside, and the hum of the engine that I'd forgotten to turn off. I should have felt rage, betrayal, the sharp sting of anger rising in my throat. But I didn't. I just felt tired. Bone deep, soul deep tired. I didn't drive straight home. I took the long way, winding through familiar roads lined with houses I used to admire when Vanessa was a little girl. I passed the park where we used to feed ducks, the school she once begged me to walk her into because she didn't want to go alone, the diner where we'd get pancakes after her dance recitals. Memories pressed in like shadows, soft and full of color, but now strangely distant. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I left the soup container in the passenger seat. I couldn't bear to bring it inside. I sat for a while, hands folded in my lap, staring at the porch light flickering over the flower beds I still took care of. There was no one waiting inside for me. No sounds of footsteps, no laughter spilling from the kitchen, just the quiet click of the door as I let myself in. I poured a glass of water and sat at the table, not because I was thirsty, but because I needed to do something with my hands. Then the tears came. Not loud or dramatic, but slow, steady, like a faucet left slightly open. I cried for the version of me who had believed that showing up meant something, for the mother who thought she had built something lasting, and maybe more than anything, for the woman I had been before I began molding myself around their needs. Eventually, I stood up, dried my face, and went to the hall closet again. I didn't take out the file box this time. I just looked at it, sitting there quietly on the shelf, as if it were waiting for me to decide. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't going to be a confrontation. I wouldn't call Vanessa, demand answers, or ask why. I had already seen enough. Words couldn't unring that bell. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and opened a blank note. I didn't write much, just a single sentence that felt truer than anything else I could have said. I saw the dinner. Don't worry, I won't be a burden again. I didn't send it right away. I saved it, letting the words sit there, clean and complete. There would be time for the rest. For now, it was enough. The next day I would begin, not with noise or fury, but with small, deliberate choices. With each quiet step, I would take myself back. The next morning I woke up early, not out of habit, but because sleep had been uneasy and filled with restless thoughts. The house was still quiet, sunlight just beginning to stretch across the kitchen floor. I didn't make coffee right away. I didn't open the curtains. I just sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, listening to the silence and letting the stillness settle. By 8, I was standing in front of the hall closet again. My fingers hovered over the latch of the file box before I opened it. There it was, just as I had left it, rows of labeled folders, neatly organized, some worn soft at the edges from years of being handled. I had always kept things in order. There was a comfort in knowing where every document lived, a sense of control that helped me feel grounded during the chaos of raising a child, managing a household, and later supporting a family that didn't even realize how much I had given. I took the box to the kitchen table and opened it slowly, folder by folder. Tuition records for the boys' private school, payments made from my account during those years Greg had trouble at work. A printout of the mortgage agreement I had co-signed when they bought the house and came up short. Greg had called it a temporary favor. Vanessa had promised it would be for just a year. That was nearly 6 years ago. Next was the medical loan I had taken out quietly when Vanessa called me crying about the cost of an emergency surgery Greg's mother needed. She had called me a lifesaver through tears and promised she'd never forget it. I had believed her. I even remember writing the loan number on a sticky note and placing it inside the file, telling myself I'd throw it out when they started paying me back. They never did. The deeper I went into that box, the more I realized it was a record of every time I had tried to make their life easier. Electricity bills I had covered, grocery receipts I never asked to be reimbursed for, even the check I wrote when they needed to enroll the boys in summer camp. It wasn't just money. It was time, energy, emotional labor. I had been their safety net, and I had accepted that role quietly, without complaint, because I believed it made me part of the family. I thought that if I just kept giving, they would always make room for me. But now, sitting at the table with the proof spread out in front of me, I understood something else. They had come to expect it. My support had become invisible, a background hum they no longer heard. And the dinner I wasn't invited to had simply confirmed what the file box now screamed in silence. I closed the lid gently, not in anger, but with a calm that surprised me. I had the records. I had the truth. Now it was time to decide what to do with it. I started with the bank. There was no drama in it, no shaking hands or racing heart, just a quiet, steady rhythm of reclaiming what I had handed over so freely. I logged into my online account, pulled up the scheduled payments, and canceled them one by one. The mortgage auto draft, the school tuition, the monthly contribution I had set up 2 years ago to help with groceries. It was strange how easy it was. Just a few clicks, a few confirmation prompts, and suddenly the flow of money stopped. Next came the passwords. I had kept them all in a small notebook tucked in the back of the file box. Bank logins, medical portals, utility accounts. So many of them I had set up myself, helping Vanessa and Greg manage things during a time they said was just too overwhelming. I changed the ones tied to my name. I reset the security questions. I took my name off the electric bill and the water service. I left their side of it untouched. They were adults, after all. They could handle their responsibilities the same way I had handled mine for so long. By noon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, a folder in my lap, her voice soft and curious as she read over the documents I wanted to update. She didn't ask many questions, and I was grateful for that. Only when we got to the section about my will did she glance up. "Still planning to leave the house to Vanessa and Greg?" she asked gently. I looked at the paperwork in front of me, the signatures from years past. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. Then I shook my head. "No, I'd like to revise that part." She nodded and began making notes. No judgment, no surprise. Just the facts, written down in clean ink. I could feel something loosening in my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. When I left her office, the sun was out. The breeze was soft. I stopped at the bakery on the corner and bought myself a small chocolate tart. the kind I used to buy as a treat when I was younger. I sat on a bench outside, the box warm in my hands, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself eat something, just for me. That afternoon, I sent the message. I didn't wait until I changed my mind. I typed it exactly as I had saved it days earlier. I saw the dinner. Don't worry, I won't be a burden again. No explanation, no bitterness. Just a simple acknowledgement of what I knew and what I was choosing. I turned off my phone after it was sent, not to avoid the reaction, but because I didn't need to hear it. I had said what I needed to say. Now, whatever came next would come. But it would not come on my shoulders. Not anymore. The silence that followed was immediate and sharp. No immediate reply, no missed calls, not even a typing bubble. I watched the clock for a while, waiting for something. A reaction, an apology, even outrage. But there was nothing. Just the quiet tick of time, moving forward, indifferent to the storm I knew must be stirring on the other end. I left my phone on the hallway table, face down, and went outside to water the garden. The hydrangeas were in bloom, full and blushing at the edges, their heavy heads nodding in the early afternoon breeze. I trimmed back the rose bushes, swept the walkway, and refilled the bird bath. These were small things, but they reminded me that my life had corners untouched by them, parts of myself that had nothing to do with being a mother, a helper, or a safety net. It wasn't until evening that the phone lit up. Vanessa's name blinked across the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again, and again. 4 times in an hour. No voicemails, just silence after each missed call. By the 5th, she left a message. Mom, I don't know what you saw or think you saw. Greg wasn't feeling great earlier, and we decided to still have dinner with his parents. It wasn't a big thing. I just didn't want to bother you. Please call me back. We can talk about this. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Later that night, Greg's number appeared. I hadn't heard his voice in months. Even when I helped cover bills or watched the boys, it was always Vanessa who relayed things. But now, he was calling directly. I ignored it. He left a message too, louder and less careful. Evelyn, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're blowing this out of proportion. We're grateful for everything, okay? But sometimes people need space. It's not personal. You've always been involved. And maybe this was just one dinner. One dinner, not the end of the world. There it was. Not the end of the world. I didn't need to hear more. I knew what he meant, even if he didn't say it plainly. I was too much, too involved, too present, not invited, not necessary, just tolerated. So I did what I had promised in my message. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself or try to explain how it felt to watch your place at the table, filled by someone who had never lifted a finger when things were hard. I didn't remind them of all I had done, of the nights I stayed up worrying, the sacrifices they never saw. I just let the silence speak for me. And in that silence, I began to find something I hadn't known I was missing. Space. My own space. Not the kind they gave me, but the kind I was now choosing for myself. By the 3rd day, the silence had become its own kind of presence. I could feel it sitting in the room with me, not heavy, but aware. The calls kept coming, fewer now, but still regular. Vanessa tried texting instead, short messages that started polite and turned frantic. Mom, please just talk to me. I didn't mean to hurt you. This is getting out of hand. We need to fix this. Each one read like someone trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, as if a handful of words could erase the image of her laughing with others while I stood outside in the dark. I read them, then set the phone down without replying. I didn't delete them, but I didn't answer either. I was done begging to be seen. Greg's messages stopped altogether, which didn't surprise me. I had never been his priority. In the early years, he was polite enough, calling me ma'am even when I told him not to. But as time went on, that politeness thinned into obligation. He tolerated me, not unkindly, but always at a distance. Vanessa had once told me that Greg's parents found me overbearing, that maybe I should give them more room when they visited. So I had. I skipped weekends. I kept my distance. I told myself I was being respectful. But that dinner showed me something else. I had made room for them by stepping out of the picture entirely, and instead of noticing the empty space I left behind, they simply filled it. There was no guilt, no pause, not even a question about why I hadn't come. That was what hurt the most, not the exclusion, but the ease with which it happened. On the fourth day, Vanessa showed up at my house. I heard the car door, the hurried footsteps up the walk, the familiar knock. I stayed in my chair, tucked in the corner of the living room with a book I wasn't really reading. The knock came again, louder this time, then a call through the door. "Mom, I know you're home. Please open the door. Can we just talk?" I didn't move. I sat perfectly still, heart beating fast but steady. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing. She stayed for another minute, maybe two, before I heard the shuffle of her retreat. Her car started, backed out of the driveway, and rolled down the street. That night, she sent one more message. "I don't know what to do anymore. Please. I'm sorry. Tell me how to fix this." I read it slowly, then turned off the phone and set it back on the hallway table. It wasn't that I didn't feel her sorrow. I did. I believed she meant it. But I also knew that sorrow born of panic isn't the same as understanding. She wanted to fix the discomfort, not the truth behind it. And I wasn't going to rescue her from that truth, not this time. A week passed before I saw her again. She came during the afternoon unannounced, like before, but this time I opened the door. Vanessa stood there with her hands clutched around her phone, eyes already shining with unshed tears. She looked like a little girl again, nervous and unsure, like she used to be when she had broken something she wasn't supposed to touch. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I nodded, stepped aside, and led her to the kitchen. We didn't sit at the table where we used to sip tea and go over school forms. Instead, I leaned against the counter while she sat down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. She started, her voice cracking. "I didn't know how to make it right. You haven't said anything, and I didn't know if you were angry or just done with us." I waited a moment before responding. Not because I didn't have words, but because I wanted to make sure I said them calmly. I had already cried those tears. I wasn't interested in spilling them again just to make her feel better. "I'm not angry," I said, watching her eyes lift to meet mine. "I'm just clear." She blinked, confused. "Clear?" "I saw what I needed to see," I continued, my voice steady. "You told me dinner was canceled, and when I dropped off soup, I saw everyone else gathered around that table. Greg's parents sitting in my spot, you smiling like nothing was missing. That wasn't a mistake, that was a choice." Vanessa looked away then, her face flushed with guilt. She tried to speak, but I raised my hand gently, not to silence her out of cruelty, but to hold the moment still. "I'm not going to fight for a place at the table, Vanessa. I've done that for too long. I won't ask to be included when being left out was done so easily." "But it wasn't meant that way," she said quickly. "It was just a last-minute decision. Greg didn't feel great earlier, but then he said he felt better, and his parents were already coming." I cut her off with a look, not sharp, just firm. "You didn't think I needed to be there. You didn't think I'd notice. That's the truth. And now, I need you to hear mine." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I loved being there for you," I said. "Every ride, every meal, every check I wrote. I did it because I love you, but I can't keep giving without being seen. It's not about one dinner. It's about every time I made myself small so someone else could feel comfortable. I won't do that anymore." Vanessa cried into her hands, the weight of my words settling between us like fog. I didn't rush to console her. I didn't offer a tissue. This was her part to sit in. For the first time, I wasn't softening the truth. I was simply standing in it. and it felt like breathing clean air. After Vanessa left that day, there was a hollow quiet that hung in the house, not heavy or sad, just open. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like something was missing. It felt like space had been cleared. That evening, I pulled out an old envelope tucked behind a stack of mail I had nearly thrown away. Inside was a flyer from my old book club, the one I had stopped going to after the boys were born. The dates were a little outdated, but the contact number was still the same. I held the paper in my hands and hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from the surprise of remembering how much I had once loved those evenings. The smell of coffee and cookies, the low murmur of women laughing and disagreeing over plot twists and character flaws, the comfort of being part of something where no one needed me to fix anything. I called the number that night. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. It was Denise, the organizer, her tone bright and warm even before I said who I was. "Evelyn? My goodness, is that really you?" she said with a joy that was both real and unexpected. "We've missed you, you know." I nearly choked up at the ease of it, the way she welcomed me back without question or judgment. We talked for a few minutes, catching up briefly. She told me they were meeting next Tuesday at her place, same time, same crowd, though a few new faces had joined. I promised I would be there. On Tuesday, I put on a soft sweater, a shade of green I used to wear when I wanted to feel alive. I baked a batch of shortbread cookies and arrived a little early, unsure of what kind of reception to expect after all those years. But the moment I walked in, I was met with warmth. Not the kind that asks for explanations, just the kind that opens a chair and passes you a cup of tea. They were reading a novel I hadn't heard of, something modern and sharp about mothers and daughters. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't say much at first, just listened. But by the second chapter's discussion, I found myself laughing at a comment Denise made, my voice mixing into the room like it had never left. That night, when I got home, I didn't feel lonely. I felt something else. Grounded. Steady. Seen in a way I hadn't realized I had been missing. The next morning, I opened a map and unfolded it across the kitchen table. There was a little seaside town I had once driven through on vacation years ago. I remembered the color of the water, the quiet streets, the sound of gulls overhead. I traced my finger along the highway that led there and circled it softly. Maybe it was time to go back, not to the past, but toward something new, something mine. I booked the trip quietly. Just a few days, a simple bed and breakfast near the coast. It wasn't an escape. It wasn't a statement. It was a soft step toward something I had long put off without even realizing it. I didn't tell Vanessa I was going. I didn't leave a note or a schedule of return. For the first time in years, I let my plans belong entirely to me. The drive was peaceful. Long stretches of road lined with fields and tall trees that gave way to small towns and winding lanes. I kept the radio low, letting the silence between songs fill the car like an old friend. When I finally reached the edge of the sea, the air shifted. It smelled like salt and open sky, the kind of scent that reminded you the world was wide and still waiting. The innkeeper was a woman about my age, kind-eyed and quick to notice that I was traveling alone. She gave me a room with a view and a key that still clicked in an old brass lock. The window opened out toward the water, and I stood there longer than I meant to, watching the waves gather and break against the shore in rhythms older than anything I had ever worried about. That evening, I walked into town and ate at a little restaurant tucked beside a bookstore. The waitress asked if I was expecting anyone, and when I said no, she smiled and set down a place setting with care, not pity. I ordered a glass of wine and a bowl of clam chowder and took my time with every bite. Around me, couples chatted and children squirmed, and music played faintly from an old speaker in the corner. I wasn't part of their stories, and for once, that felt like a kind of freedom. The next morning, I visited a real estate office, not with the urgency of someone ready to leave it all behind, but with the curiosity of someone considering what else might be possible. The agent, a man named Paul, showed me a few listings. Nothing fancy, nothing large. Just quiet homes with clean kitchens and windows that caught the morning light. One of them had a small garden out back and a reading nook by the fireplace. I didn't make any decisions. I didn't have to. Just knowing I could was enough. When I walked back along the beach that afternoon, my shoes in one hand and the sea breeze brushing past my face, I felt something in me shift. Not a full turn, not a break, just a tilt. Like my life was beginning to face the sun again after years of shadow. I hadn't come to disappear. I had come to remember, to breathe, to sit with myself not as someone's mother or helper, but as Evelyn. A woman who still had places to go, even if she took her time getting there. When I returned from the coast, there was a stack of mail waiting and a voicemail from Vanessa that had been left 3 days into my trip. Her voice trembled just enough to be noticeable, filled with apologies that circled themselves like a loop too afraid to land. She said she missed me. She said the boys missed me too, that they had asked where Grandma went, and that she hadn't known what to say. I sat with that message for a long time, not because I didn't know how I felt, but because it was the first time she had mentioned the boys. For years, I had been the one picking them up from school, sitting through their school plays, cheering from the soccer sidelines, when work pulled her away. I was their second pair of hands, their comfort, their consistency. And yet, when it came time for something as simple as a shared meal, I had been the only name left off the list. Greg never called again. He hadn't even sent a message after the last conversation. I knew better than to expect humility from him. He had always preferred control over conversation, answers over questions, and in his world my silence was likely seen as defiance. But I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was simply stepping out of the performance. I didn't go back to their house. I didn't attend the next family birthday, even though I saw the photos Vanessa posted online a week later. Her captions were warm, bright, full of gratitude and community. Greg's parents were in almost every photo, arms looped around the boys, faces lit with joy. I wasn't in any of them. Not just because I wasn't there, but because it no longer even seemed strange that I wouldn't be. That absence used to hurt. It used to sting the way a paper cut stings, not deep, but constantly there. But now it just sat quietly in the background, like a bruise that had finally stopped throbbing. Not because it had healed completely, but because I had stopped pressing on it. Vanessa sent a few more messages over the weeks. Some were soft and nostalgic, others more urgent, asking if I had talked to a lawyer, if I had changed anything she should know about. That was the only moment that gave me pause, the quiet edge of fear in her voice when she realized I was not only emotionally stepping away, but legally too. I didn't reply. Some things don't need explanation, they just need space. What I had given them all these years was never about money or meals. It was love, in its purest form. But even love has a cost when it's never returned. And the cost of being overlooked isn't loud. It is quiet, cumulative, and carried in small, invisible ways until the day you decide you've carried enough. That winter, I bought a new table. It wasn't large, just a small, round one made of dark wood, with a smooth finish and legs that curved gently inward. I found it at a little antique shop 2 towns over, tucked behind an old record player and a collection of brass candlesticks. The man who sold it to me asked if I needed help loading it into the car. I told him I could manage, and I did. I cleared the corner by the window in my kitchen, the spot where morning light lingered the longest. I set the table there and placed 2 simple chairs beside it, not because I expected company, but because the symmetry felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I was creating something just for myself. A space not borrowed or inherited, not shared under terms I didn't choose. The first meal I ate there was quiet and warm. A bowl of roasted tomato soup, crusty bread with melted butter, and a glass of wine I had been saving for no occasion at all. I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone. I sat with the quiet hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the house settling around me. It was enough. Outside, the sky was a soft shade of blue that only winter can produce, washed clean and wide. I watched it as I sipped my wine, thinking not about what I had lost, but what I had begun to find. There is a kind of clarity that comes after silence. Not the silence used to punish or avoid, but the kind that rises when noise no longer distracts you from your own voice. Vanessa still called sometimes. She never stopped trying completely. Her tone changed depending on the week, sometimes hopeful, sometimes heavy with guilt, sometimes clipped with frustration. But I had stopped answering. I didn't block her. I didn't erase her. I simply chose when and if I would respond. That, in itself, was new. I sent the boys birthday cards. No money inside, just notes written in my hand reminding them I loved them. I didn't ask Vanessa if they got 'em. I didn't wait for a thank you. I sent them because I wanted to, not because I had to. The seaside town still called to me. I hadn't moved yet, but I was closer. I had sorted through my belongings, donated old clothes, and cleared shelves that had been crowded with things kept out of habit rather than joy. Each drawer I emptied felt like another small reclaiming of space. I could see it now, the little house with the garden and the light in the windows. It was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a plan, and in that kitchen by the window, at that new table I had chosen for myself, I understood something simple but profound. I had never needed their permission to belong in my own life. I only needed to stop waiting for a place at their table and make room at mine.